Chapter 6 Sunken Ships and Cannibals. Days and weeks went by. Captain Nemo rarely made an appearance. The panels on the sides of the ship were kept open all the time. That way, everyone on board could view the mysteries of underwater life. The first mate marked their position on a map for all to see. They were in the Pacific Ocean near the Hawaiian Islands. They were headed southeast. To date, they had traveled 4,860 leagues, or 14,580 miles from their starting point. It was now the night of December 11th. The Nautilus lay motionless at 3,000 feet below sea level. The professor was staring out the large windows when he saw a large black object near the Nautilus. He looked puzzled. Was this some kind of oversized whale? As they looked closely at the object, they realized it was not a living thing. The professor saw the mast of a ship. "It's a ship!" cried the professor. "It's a sunken ship!" The ship appeared to have sunk only a few hours before. There were no signs of sea life clinging to it. It was a sad sight to see. The next thing they saw were dead bodies that seemed to be clinging to the ship. The bodies were tied with ropes. They must have tied themselves to the mast of the ship so they would not drown. They needed something to hang on to. There were dead bodies all over the deck. The worst sight of all was a young woman tied to the mast. She was holding a baby in her arms. The baby was at a higher level above its mother's head. It looked as if the mother was trying to protect her baby. The woman seemed to be quite young, hardly old enough to protect herself. The arms of the baby were around its mother's neck. The sight was more than men of the Nautilus could bear. Just as the passengers thought they could stand no more, a shark went near the sunken ship. It must have gotten the scent of blood. It was looking to satisfy its hunger. Minutes later, a whole school of sharks had surrounded the dead bodies and began to make a meal out of them. The Nautilus left the area shortly after, but the men sat motionless for a long time. On January 2nd, the Nautilus was at water level. It entered the Torres Strait. This was a body of water between Australia and New Guinea. It was a dangerous place to sail. There were many sharp rocks to watch for, and worst of all, it was known that cannibals lived along the coast. No one felt good about going through the narrow straits, not even the sailors who had made it safely through before. Captain Nemo himself took charge of steering the Nautilus through the dangerous straits, past the sharp reefs. As they neared the end of the strait, a sudden blow knocked them off their feet. The ship had hit a reef and had gone aground. They would be grounded until the water rose. That would be in about 5 days, when the full moon would appear. Ned said to the professor, "This is our chance to get away. We are only 2 miles from land." The professor told Ned that it was not safe to try and escape now. There were many cannibals living along the coast. They would surely have a hunger for them if they were caught. The professor did not like the thought of being someone's lunch. One day, the captain told the professor and Ned they could go ashore to hunt for meat if they wished. But he warned them to watch out for the cannibals. The professor and Ned were a little afraid, but the thought of eating some meat after eating fish for so long got them going. The next morning, the professor and Ned set sail in a small boat. They were armed with guns to catch their evening meal. Instead of being afraid, they were overjoyed to be on dry land again. There were many fruit trees on the land. They ate bananas, apples, and pears. Then they loaded the small boat with the fresh fruit. Before long, they were in the forest hunting for some meat. By afternoon, the men had killed some animals and were making a fire to cook the meat. They were sitting and eating their food when suddenly stones and arrows came at them. The cannibals had arrived. The professor and Ned dropped everything. They made tracks and ran as fast as they could. The cannibals kept close behind them all the way. There were hundreds of them. The professor and Ned reached their small boat. As they got into the boat, stones and arrows were being thrown at them from all directions. The cannibals got into their canoes and followed them to the Nautilus. When they safely reached the Nautilus, the professor went to see the captain right away. He told him what had happened. As the professor spoke, they could hear the cannibals running back and forth on top of the Nautilus. They were looking for a way in. Captain Nemo did not seem to be worried. "Watch this," he said. Captain Nemo opened the hatch. The cannibals put their heads in and looked down the stairwell. As one cannibal touched the stairwell, Captain Nemo pulled a switch. The cannibal screamed out in pain. He ran back and forth wildly, screaming in terror. Seeing this, the other cannibals jumped into their canoes and headed for shore. You see, the captain had electrified the stairwell.